Thank you all. I'll now just, before closing the statement, closing the dialogue, let me share a few thoughts with you. And first of all, I would like to thank you all, more than 600 participants in this 11th High Commissioner's Dialogue. I want to thank you all for the very good discussions that we have had. I take the point of the Women's Refugee Commission that sometimes the dialogue becomes a statement, but it's a little bit inevitable when we put together different stakeholders, but there's always room to learn. Personally, for me, this was the third High Commissioner's Dialogue, and I found that the level and quality of the debate, also in the various sessions, because a lot of the debate happens there as well, was very good, perhaps the best of the three that I have participated in. So I think that we're all learning and improving. And by the way, an important practical point at the outset is that all the result, the outcome, or rather the summaries of the discussions that have taken place, all of them will be put as soon as they're prepared. We'll do our best to do it quickly on the special website for the High Commissioner's Dialogue, so they'll be accessible, public and accessible to all participants and beyond. And if there is one general observation that I have to make, it's, I hope I don't sound inappropriate here, it's like when you go on a date and then you say, but why haven't we met before? Where were we before? And I think it's a little bit like that, because there is such an affinity, and here I speak as the head of UNHCR, there is such an affinity between us and cities. Really so many affinities. Now, of course, it is not true that we haven't met before. As was mentioned, we have been working on this issue even together very often. But again, in response to that remark that we've heard these things for many years, yes, we have heard these things for many years, but I have a feeling that, especially with the establishment of the Global Compact, we have now a more solid framework within which to discuss the same issues that, yes, indeed, we've been discussing for a long time, and with more institutional and, may I say, the P word, political commitment to make this succeed. And I think that because of the prominence that the refugee issue has taken in the past 4 or 5 years, sometimes negative prominence that it has taken. This has, however, facilitated the creation of a context within which I think we can work concretely towards solutions. And really, this affinity, and it's not just between UNHCR and cities, it's between all the partners gathered in this room, especially humanitarian organizations, human rights organizations, and cities and local governments. This affinity is because we are at the sharp end of the stick, are we not? We are where refugee protection is made real. We are at the point, we are working where we have to confront challenges in a very principled but very pragmatic ways, and focusing on delivery, focusing also in the case of refugees, and this is where cities have really an important role to play, focusing on that complex, delicate, sensitive relationship between refugees and host communities. And this is why I think as we move towards the implementation of the Global Compact, cities, local governments, local institutions, together with civil society, will truly play a key role. And Volker was just pointing out to me how many times in statements here and in debates in the breakout sessions, many of you participants, quoted back to us the Global Compact, indicating numbers of paragraphs. We're glad that you read it carefully and that you know it well. This is a good sign and a good start. And then, I just want to go back to what Vittoria said yesterday, which is also a very important message that comes from this 2 days of dialogue, that most of what the Compact says, you said, the cities do, or rather must do. have to do because of the situation they are in. So these are all important considerations that I wanted to share. We collectively, the UNHCR team, reflecting today on the dialogue, we have drawn 5 conclusions and 5 practical follow-up points from the discussions, and also from the very interesting points that yesterday and today were conveyed to us through these pigeonhole systems. First of all, conclusions. Our first conclusion would be, our first proposal would be to say cities have a leadership role in this area. Cities, of course, are very diverse. We have seen it very much yesterday and today. What was conveyed to us was a constellation of experiences and approaches. Cities, even cities represented here, are different in size, in geographical location, in challenges that they have to face. But there are some commonalities. One speaker, I quote, mentioned an ecosystem of welcome. I think it's a nice expression. Welcome provided in so many different ways. So we really believe, we at UNHCR believe, and even more so after this dialogue, that cities have a key leadership role to play in shaping the narrative. This was such a strong theme yesterday and today, in shaping the narrative about refugees, but also about migrants. We heard this in Marrakesh very strongly, and this is important. And another important point, first conclusion point, that this leadership is underpinned by an approach that must be centered on dignity. I want to quote back again Manos, who said earlier that when we talk about refugees as asset, certainly we must talk about refugees as contributors, as people that can pay back, give back. But I think that there are refugees who cannot do that because of the many vulnerabilities that we know. Their asset is their humanity. And I think that this is what needs to underpin this constellation, this ecosystem of welcome, really founded on solidarity, beyond the very important practical contributions that refugees can bring to their host societies. My second conclusion is that inclusion is such an important word. It's perhaps one of the 2 or 3 most important words of the compact. And it is very important. This is, I mentioned this yesterday, let's get away, we cannot always get away from refugee camps, but refugee camps somehow symbolize exclusion. Let's move towards inclusion, and all of you have in different ways talked about that. But it is important to flag that under inclusion is not just beneficial to refugees, it can also be very beneficial to host society. And many examples of this, of refugees really giving back to communities who have welcomed them, have been welcome. And it was good to have refugees here among us, as the ambassador of Chad said earlier. It is very good to hear that experience because it confirms what we know about it. We know very well from experiences like in Kakuma, for example, that investments driven by the refugees and by the presence of refugees can be of benefit to the economies of a city, of an urban area. I want to also quote back with pride, because he's a representative of my city, Milan in Italy, what the representative of the municipality of Milan said in one of the round tables, that shaping policies to welcome refugees has helped his city to shape social policies that are beneficial to other groups, the homeless, for example. So really, I think it's important to look at that as well. This is another way for refugees to be contributing to the host society. And of course, cities, what has come forward very strongly in this sense is that cities also can allow us to have a much better understanding about refugees, can allow us to carry out a much better mapping of the vulnerabilities of these people. And this is also very important. And therefore, the conclusion of the second point is that the participation of refugees and two-way participation of refugees and host community in shaping this inclusion is fundamental. And may I flag here a point which is not secondary, that in this exercise, in this effort, the role of young refugees and young members of the host communities is equally important. I am so happy that in this dialogue, I have noticed a very high participation of young people. It doesn't always happen in this fora, but it was very visible here, and I want to flag it as an important issue. A third conclusion is that the cities reminded us that we must not forget what I would call the nuts and bolts, the immediate but urgent preoccupations, the immediate but urgent pressures on infrastructures, on services. The most voted comment of the pigeonholes today on shelter and housing. This is very fundamental. And we should not forget the importance when we talk about inclusion. Inclusion is inclusion in very practical issues. Inclusion in education, that so many of you have mentioned, in health services, in financial services. These are fundamental pillars of access. But there was a message also that inclusion, access and inclusion, are broader than just the hardware, if you want, of inclusion. Access to sports. I was in a roundtable yesterday on sports. Access to sports is very important, but also access to music, to arts, to cultural activities. Because what will allow better lives for refugees and better inclusion in host communities for the time in which they have to live there is not just the material things that will make their lives better, but also those things like sports and arts that improve the fundamental human connections that we're talking about. And all this, talking of nuts and bolts, needs money, needs resources. This is an overwhelming message that we have heard and that we must do something about. Resources are often a discussion in the refugee sphere between international organizations and governments. We must expand that discussion in order to make inclusion, to make that welcome possible. A fourth conclusion is, of course, that debate that the executive director of Habitat introduced yesterday about local and global. It's really local to global to local and back again. It's a constant interaction. I see her there. It's a constant interaction between these two levels, because cities conduct local efforts but help shape a global response. And what Volker was reminding us today, which I think is so important, somehow refugees bring the global dimension to the local level. The global challenges that refugees represent in terms of solutions, for example, to the local level. So this interaction between local and global is very important. And here, I think, the whole issue of responsibility sharing comes to the fore very strongly. The compact can provide a key to how to improve responsibility sharing. One of you yesterday in a bilateral was asking me, you talk about responsibility sharing. What does it really mean? How can we quantify it? This is particularly tough for host countries, for host cities. Responsibility sharing, seen from their perspective, is still very imbalanced and unfair. And I think that the compact offers an opportunity to redress that imbalance slowly. It won't happen very quickly, but I think that if we use its tools in decisive and appropriate ways, this can happen. And somehow that international responsibility sharing, which the compact promotes, has to be applied also nationally. This is a message that comes very strongly from all of you. you want more national responsibility sharing between different cities, between the central government and cities, because the national governments, of course, you've said it, many of you said it, are enablers. They have to create the right policies. They have to provide the resources. But I think that responsibility sharing can also be improved on a horizontal level, not leaving some of the cities sharing all the burden. And again, to quote Habitat, not leaving any mayor behind. This is really an important message. Somehow, we were reflecting this, this first day of the compact or second day of the compact was a useful place to reflect that, we have a global compact. We should have, this is not official, it's just an idea. We should have almost national compacts. Some of the countries described here are almost national compacts. We should almost go down to the city level and have local compacts between the different actors that contribute. And finally, the final conclusion and then some practical points, really we must work together. I think that's what the compact says, but it became very obvious from the discussions here. In the spirit of the compact, we must respond together to this crisis, and it was good to have so many different partners around the table here, around the different tables, global partners like Habitat, like the World Bank, like member states themselves, but also national and local partners, businesses, faith leaders, civil society, NGOs, private citizen, academia, volunteers. Many were represented here. That diversity of response is vital to a more successful response to refugee crisis, and it embodies the compact. To conclude, a few very practical points that I'd like to share with you. First, UNHCR has an urban refugee policy. It is exactly 9 years old. So I think that in its 10th year, this urban policy will have to be reviewed. And will have to be reviewed in light of many, many of the things that have emerged from this dialogue, and of course in light of the compact. So this is, for me, the easiest commitment, because this is something that we decide as UNHCR. We'll be consulting with you, all of you that are stakeholders in this, but we will review our urban refugee policy. Second, and important, in follow-up to the global compact, first of all, remember, the compact specifically mentions cities and local government as key players in its paragraph 37. So this is institutionalized in the compact. Some of you have mentioned the digital platform. This is in paragraph 106 of the compact. It is mentioned. The digital platform will be a place to gather good practices and facilitate exchanges on those practices. And we will make sure after this dialogue that city issues, if I may call them like this, will be included in the digital platform. This will allow us not only to look at good practices, but also identify gaps in tools, gaps in guidance, and it will allow us, because that will be the purpose also of the platform, to link up with other aspects in the follow-up of the Global Compact. The establishment of academic networks, of business organization, of sports organization, and so forth. So digital platform as an important tool to follow up on this discussion and stay in touch. Third, the Global Refugee Forum, which of course in itself is a follow-up to the Global Compact. It will be, as you know, next year co-hosted by UNHCR. As co-host, I don't have the final say on everything that the forum will be about or the way it will be structured, but I would like to go back to what I called yesterday the Ecuadorian proposal, the proposal by Ecuador to make sure that in the global forum, a year from now, there will be a space for city involvement, drawing on their perspective, on their expertise, but also on the lessons learned in this year leading to to the forum. In fact, we were hoping, but this is a bit provocative, I'm addressing this to governments, maybe it would be good if some of you had city representatives as part of your delegation, as is the case now. It will enrich the forum, and it will show also cohesion and unity of intent between national and local level, which I think is one of the strongest messages of this dialogue. Fourth, the issue of city networks. A message came loud and clear, even from the feedback from several of you. We don't want to create a new city network. Be assured of that. There is enough. There's many of them. So we don't want to create a new one. But paragraph 38 of the Global Compact talks about city networks, talk about existing city networks. There are many. I learned about many even in these last 2 days. What I think we need to do is to ensure that through those of you who are members and influential in city networks, we influence the discussion of those networks. The Mayor Quito, who is a member of many, was telling me today that the discussion is very much at the policy level. Seldom does it go in that network at the granular, practical level where you need solutions, actions, support. So we need to influence the debate in those networks, and we will continue to do it through our own network here. But this is what we need to do in order to forge common approaches, to work on benchmarks for inclusion, to work on access issues, to work on resources, because I think that through these networks we can improve the manner in which local governments, city governments can have access also to international resources. This was raised by many. That access is not always easy. And here, if I can say that UNHCR itself is ready to help making that link, taking advantage of the linkages that we have established through the compact with development organizations, international financial institutions, we're ready to play that role in refugee responses carried out by cities. And then we can use the networks also for that purpose. And last, of course, the issue of communications and advocacy that was very strongly discussed in many parts of the dialogue. This is also a commitment on UNHCR because the message was very strong. How can we change the narrative? Let's be frank. Around this, the cities represented here, the participants from civil society, all of us feel very strongly about solidarity, about welcoming people, about inclusion, about all the themes that we have mentioned. Not all cities think the same. There's many others who do not. There's many other members of civil society that, as we tweet about our experience here, are ready to provide very critical remarks. And I think that we need to also reach out to them. This is what communication is about. In order to promote more positive narratives, in order to tackle head-on xenophobia and other forms of hostility that are growing so dramatically in all our societies, and not just in the rich world, but all over the world. So we will continue to debate as we do it internally in UNHCR, but we will reach out to many of you because I think we need your cooperation, and especially the cooperation of like-minded cities in developing a discourse that reaches out, that doesn't become a discourse between the already converted, but seeks to go out to those, especially to those that may be in the middle, whose anxieties may be exploited by some unscrupulous politicians. These are those that we need to reach out to. So let me conclude with a final comment that is a bit of a repeat of what I said yesterday, but maybe more clear now after having listened to all the debates. I really want to pay tribute to the courage and leadership of those of you, of many of you, all of you who are really leaders in this debate. And this, may I say, because I didn't say yesterday, this must necessarily include those cities, those local governments that find themselves in situations of conflict, of violence, and of extreme fragility. There are many here around this table, because all the time local municipal leaders in those places, public servants, civil society representatives are battling to keep those services going. And sometimes, even in those places, to provide protection for people that are displaced from other, even more disadvantaged countries or places. And often, this battle with no resources goes on for years and years. To that leadership, to that courage, I want to pay tribute. And I want, of course, again, to pay tribute to all those that do provide visionary civic leadership in these matters. To all those of you who have kept doors open. The doors are open at the local level. This is where the doors are, and this is where you can close or open them. So those of you, all of you who have kept them open in all the different ways that we have heard, I want to pay tribute, because, you know, if we can show to the world that that is not only right, but that is also good, we will have made a lot of progress. And the moment with the Global Compact and the transformative opportunity that it provides, the moment is a good moment. So let me conclude by again thanking you and telling you that the next appointment is not a dialogue in a year's time. For the first time in 11 years, the next appointment is the Global Refugee Forum, which, save the date, has been now set for the 17th and 18th of December 2019. So that year leading to that important moment of stock-taking and forward-looking commitment, that year starts today. Thank you all.